Good morning and welcome back to day 2 of the Top Empowerment Virtual Summit. I'm sitting in sunny Cape Town and please let me know in the chat where you're calling from again. Yesterday we had over 800 attendees, which is almost a 10 times increase from our last physical Top Empowerment event. So thank you all very much for joining us. Digital's certainly the way forward. So just to make sure that we follow protocol as we have some more very distinguished guests and speakers, let me formally introduce Honourable Minister of Justice and Correctional Services, Ronald Lamola, Honourable Deputy Minister of Trade and Industry and Competition, Nomalengelo Gina, Honourable Deputy Minister of Higher Education and Training, Buti Malamela, our esteemed panel of speakers, honoured guests, ladies and gentlemen, and all South Africans, on behalf of Topco Media, our partners, Samsung, Nedbank, and Old Mutual, I'm proud to welcome you to day 2 of the Topco's Top Empowerment Virtual Summit. So again, I'd just like to congratulate and thank all our partners who really had the courage to pivot with us to a digital experience. And the messages I got yesterday it shows that what they did proved to be a great investment. So thank you once again to Nedbank, especially their Group Executive, Kensani Nabanda, to Old Mutual and their CEO, Ian Williamson, for yesterday's session on education. It was really great. And today we've got also Samsung and their President and CEO for South Africa, Mr. Sung Yung. And really without all of their vision, this event really wouldn't be possible. So yesterday we recorded over 12 hours of informative and thought-provoking content. The team and I were seriously grateful, and I was truly excited to see the amazing comments in the chat. It was really positive, so keep them coming, please. What's clear to me is from yesterday that the collaboration and sharing best practice is essential. And we understand that this event is a start of a conversation. So what we've done is we're trying to make sure that we carry on that chat, that communication through our channels, including podcasts, newsletters, webinars, and publications. So if you want to continue engaging with this community, please sign up on Topco and go to the Business Unusual newsletter and sign up. And we'll keep you regularly updated on a daily and weekly basis. As I discussed yesterday, we're also at a really important time in our history. And what we're seeing is massive transformation in terms of mindsets, attitudes, and behavior. Having been tracking transformation for 20 years, we're extremely proud of what we've achieved, and that we've been the loudspeaker for successful Black entrepreneurs and those organizations that are driving transformation in terms of Black empowerment. We see this as a continuous evolving journey. So programs like the Top Empowerment Awards, which is happening tonight, are what helps shape that evolution. The levels of performance are shifting all the time and the boundaries are being broken. So tonight we have 80 finalists contesting for honors. So please join us for a virtual awards experience tonight between 6 and 8. I'm sure they put in the chat some more details for you. We saw again yesterday that South Africa is endowed with some great people, with great spirit and some great organizations. And for us, the trick is really looking out for that. It's looking for those pearls of wisdom. It's also clear that we have a common and unified vision for South Africa, one that is all-inclusive, healthy, and productive. And yesterday and today, we're all building the future of transformation and empowerment that we want. Topco's purpose is to create a trusted network of top companies in Africa, and the technology that's available today that's helping us fulfill that mission. So many people use the networking function yesterday. One of the things I've realized about success is it takes a team and collaboration for success to happen. So please use today to reach out to your peers. In a time when we need help, this is a chance to connect with like-minded people. Top Empowerment is really a really important driver for Topco in terms of both the research, our relationships, and our heritage. And as I mentioned yesterday, President Cyril Ramaphosa was an instigator to our first publication, Impumelelo, the top 300 Black empowered companies. He also helped us get a forward for the publication from former President Nelson Mandela that we're forever grateful. And so we're also truly excited to have the CEO of the foundation, Selo Hatang, join us today. We have another fantastic lineup of speakers today, and I think that I just want to thank you for the time, and I hope that you take advantage of what this virtual event brings you. I want to thank you for your questions in the sessions yesterday, so keep them up. The Q&As were really amazing. We had great content, great conversations. So let's keep those speakers on their toes and enjoy today. Be sure to reach out and connect with your fellow delegates. We look forward to seeing you later at the Top Empowerment Awards. And finally, I just want to introduce a really special speaker, Professor Wiseman Nkulu. I'm sure you're going to have a cracking day. Thank you all. Goodbye.
CEO of Topco Media, Mr. Ralph Fletcher, the Minister of Justice and Correctional Services, Mr. Ronald Lamula, the Rector and Vice Chancellor of University of Free State, Professor Francis Peterson, the Rector and Vice Chancellor of UWC, Professor Vivnes Lawak, the Chancellor of the University of Pretoria, Professor Wiseman Nkulu, CEO of Black Business Council, Khaki Matabane, CEO of Business Unit of South Africa, Cas Kodavia, CEO of Business Leadership South Africa, Busisiwe Mavuso, MD of BSAA, Bongiwe Kunene, CEO of National Development Agency, Mr. Tamu Mzobe. All our different corporate leaders present in this conference and government officials, the guests and all delegates, I greet you all. It is with absolute excitement for me to be invited to such an important conference that seeks to answer a very important question in the midst of the hard-hitting COVID-19 pandemic in our economy and to our enterprises. Indeed, as we are all constrained by the conditionalities that COVID-19 has created to society, and therefore forced government to make national regulations under lockdown to save lives, the unavoidable consequences that this has had in the economy is unimaginable. Small business enterprises, that is our SMEs, which is where the entire Black business are found, is the hardest hit by COVID-19. It is by no exaggeration that many of the SMEs will not survive after this pandemic. This is a troubling reality for government. In terms of Stats SA report that was issued in March 2020, out of the total number of 10.2 million employed South Africans, more than 9 million of them are employed by small business enterprises. Small business enterprises are the locomotive engine of our economy and employment because most of them are labor intensive. The full-scale effects of COVID-19 on Black business, that is BE level 1, will be felt through the numbers of retrenchments that have already begun from these companies because of the loss of trade. One of the difficult balance that has informed our approach as government during this lockdown has been a recognition that the priority must be to save lives, whilst on the other hand, mitigate the worst effect towards the economy, whose worst impact will result in people's lives being worst off. In other words, for us as government, the question has never been a choice between saving lives, even at the expense of the economy, or saving an economy at the risk of losing lives. This fine balance of the two is what informs President's approach at the smart phased-in reopening of economy, especially with sectors that are not posing risk of massive exposure to COVID-19. As the DTIC, the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition, we are under no illusion that the entire economy will face contraction. What makes the situation worse is the reality that even before the lockdown, that is in March, our economy had gone to full recession and all rating agencies had downgraded South Africa. The country's downgrade has made borrowing by businesses at worst for Black business, which are always having liquidity issues, to be more expensive. This means that fewer emerging companies will meet the requirements and pass the means test for the loans. The International Monetary Fund, that is the IMF, has established that COVID-19 closing down of the economy as an additional factor to our economy. Our GDP will fall behind with 5.8% in 2020. The South African Reserve Bank estimates a fall to GDP by 6.1%, whilst IDC estimates a fall of 6.3% in 2020. These are bad news for our economy. If taking into account the ripple effects that this fall of GDP has against our efforts to raise the standard and equality of life, growing the size of small enterprises and reindustrialization efforts, the consequences of this oblique picture is the reduction of the foreign direct investment into the country, which in turn reduces job creation both in formal and informal sectors. The effects of COVID-19 towards BBBE 100% Black-owned companies is likely to reverse the strides that have been covered over the last 20 years in the deliberate efforts made to build Black-owned companies. Black-owned companies will be in a difficult conundrum because they are fragile in their balance sheet, with no collateral to assist them in accessing credit, even in times where government has cut the base for lending rate. There is also a real danger that because of liquidity challenges, some of the BBBE level companies may face closure and be forced to sell either the large percentages to non-BE level companies, and they must be forced to close down their shops. We are concerned about this because these realities represents a reversal of the very foundations of the BBBE and transformation to our economy. This oblique picture requires a new way of doing things, especially from us in government, a capable development state that will drive the expansion trajectory to a broad-based Black economic empowerment with stringent timeframes is more urgent. This pandemic has exposed us as government in terms of the pace with which in the last 26 years we have been driving this Black agenda. We now have to rise above the parapet and drive massively the growth levels of Black companies, especially those built from scratch by Black, creating assets over and above those obtained through shares equities. We need a reset button and a different approach. This is a huge discussion in government, especially in the economic cluster. Unfortunately, it is a crisis brought about by COVID-19, but we must search to its cloud a silver lining. If the Asian tigers, that is Japan and South Korea, were an offset of the post-Second World War crisis through the aggressive drive by the state to coordinate and mobilize private sector for reinvestment and creation of new business, which turned those economies into what they are today, then we need to use this post-COVID-19 phase as a runaway time to build one of the Africa big and sophisticated economy. We need to reindustrialize our economy and be anchored around manufacturing. The phase that has taught us that speculative capital in our stock markets is not necessarily a condition for countries' wealth and prosperity. It is a bubble that is vulnerable, that whelms of investors' sentiments and can be fleeted away at a wink. But infrastructural investment, industrial investment, new economies such as those that arises from innovation and fourth industrial revolution can be leveraged for our country's prosperity. Unemployment is now sitting at 31%, and it represents a serious ticking time bomb to our social economy and stability. There is no country that can enjoy peace, that can enjoy crime-free and higher and brighter future with such levels of unemployment. It is even more stressing that the majority of unemployment falls under the age of youth. The first port of call that we are all called upon as government is to intervene decisively after COVID-19 in the labor-intensive absorptive sector. One of the discussions currently held in the sectoral determination on local employment on certain sectors by the Employment and Labour Minister, and another discussion that is held for the survivalist informal sectors such as spaza shops in townships for locals by our sister department of small business. Those are two important discussions that we are saying they are there to make sure that we shape the best economy of our country. So each and every department, especially in the economic cluster, they are all deliberating on the new accelerated approach, far different before the new normal, and reduces damages that the pandemic has caused as part of the COVID-19 recovery interventions. What is our response as the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition in South Africa? Immediately during lockdown, we have made available an amount of about 500 billion as a relief to the businesses under pressure. Our sister department, Small Business Development, also had a set of relief fund interventions for the small, medium enterprises. We recognize that government cannot have sufficient relief money for the entire economy. That is why we recognize the lamentations that regard some companies not receiving portions. Through IDC, we have set up a distress funding and the essential suppliers intervention. The funding is more than 3 billion for business support. The distress funding facility terms includes the following. 1, companies must be South African. It applies to companies that are IDC clients and the new companies in distress because of COVID-19 pandemic. There must be evidence that the concessionary finance will enable that business to trade out of any short to medium-term financial crisis. Distress funding cannot be used for funding bonuses and dividends. The company's financial need must be in excess of existence available in UIF and compensation fund. I'm just mentioning by just the few of some of the expectations that the companies must have when they want to access this funding. The post-COVID-19 phase will require that both government and business, especially Black companies, will work with government in recovery interventions. As government, we can never claim absolute knowledge and all the answers. We need a social compact and navigate the future mindful together. This is not the time to talk past each other and lay blames. We must work together. We are committed to the continuous leveraging of business playing fields, deploying the available resources at the stage to support emerging businesses. What is clear is that there are businesses that would outlive their relevance after this storm and new businesses that are inspired by new norm and fourth industrial revolution will be formed. We are ready to take up these gadgets and be the first to lead in the new forms of businesses as Black entrepreneurs. So the question that will remain with us as Black entrepreneurs is, are we seeing ourselves in that space? Are we seeing our businesses as the businesses that can take up that space of coming up with new forms of businesses? Or are we going to be chasing a moving train? So part of our responsibility also is adaptation, embracing of innovation and Black technology solution. What we need to do, that is us as government and business works with the emerging and the Black businesses and companies that are there, is that we hold each other's hand and travel this journey together. Like Asian tigers, let us rise like a python in the ashes of the post-Second World War. South Africans can lead the charge in the continent to build the resilient economy driven by the stable and rising environment of the SMMEs, especially our own Black companies and Black SMMEs. What we need to do at this stage is that we hold our hands together and move forward to make sure that we build an economy that is very resilient. Let us take the opportunities that has been opened up by this COVID-19 pandemic and see the silver line shining in the cloud of this COVID-19 pandemic. I thank you and wish this conference good deliberations and the resolutions that are going to be taking our economy forward and make sure that we build that strong economy for the sake of South Africa and Africa as a whole in the continent. I thank you.
This distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it is my singular honor to be part of this distinguished panel and conference, which over the years has brought various decision makers in one room. Of course, the advent of COVID-19 has forced us to organize ourselves differently from what we were accustomed to. I would like to extend my appreciation to the organizers of this conference for the good work they've done and also having invited me. This conference is testament to the fact that we have not allowed time to remain still. The fact that this conference has continued is proof that we are now beginning to coexist with the virus. We are living through history once again. These are truly unprecedented times, as many have observed. Our economic situation is comparable to that of the Great Depression in the 1920s. Similarly, the Great Depression itself coincided with the Spanish flu pandemic. Historic events such as this tend to shape society forever. Out of these moments in our existence as people and as a nation, we often tend to transform life as we know it. In the South African context, there can be no better manifestation of this transformation than from a state of apartheid to freedom and democracy. We often look at our past for inspiration, but also to understand what should not be done. We look to the founding great icons like former President Nelson Mandela, who annually the world over commemorates his birthday, which has now become an International Nelson Mandela Day. The International Nelson Mandela Day forces all of us to break our daily cycles of life and take stock of our immediate surroundings and assess how can we make a difference to those who do not have privileges. That delivering a keynote address on the International Nelson Mandela Day, the Secretary General of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres, said, "The legacy of colonialism still reverberates. We see this economic and social injustice, the rise of hate crimes and xenophobia, the persistent institutionalized racism and white supremacy. Since the advent of democracy, this has been our preoccupation. As I say that, I also concede that corruption has set us back a long way. COVID-19 has laid bare both the cost of corruption and our colonial legacy. Therefore, now more than ever, transformation needs to be structural. This requires deliberate collaboration between the private sector and government. Transformation cannot just be reduced to demographic representations. True transformation of the legal profession is not just about demographics. It is also about the types of work given to lawyers. Commercial law and conveyancing has historically been both areas of legal practice that have been inaccessible to Black and previously disadvantaged legal practitioners. Allow me to take you back to the opening address to the Law Society of Transvaal on the 29th of October 1993, delivered by Mandela himself. In his speech, Mandela said, "The organized legal profession will have to give serious attention as to what steps it will take to remedy the imbalance of particularly in relation to opportunities of Black people to join its ranks. We are not unmindful of some attempts being made to facilitate their entry into the profession, but is there enough being done to remove it?" He went on to ask the following: is the profession happy that a number of conveyancers and notary publics who are not white can be counted on the finger of one's hands? Today, more than ever, the question that Mandela raised is relevant. The legal profession, moreover, in areas that Mandela spoke about, regrettable, continues to be predominantly white and also highly dominated by white males. Transformation in these areas is an economic imperative that we are seized with. Our efforts and interactions today must champion the cause of accelerating rapid transformation also of the legal profession. One of the characteristics of the South African economy is its concentration in most of its strategic sectors. Although one finds many law firms owned by previously disadvantaged individuals, certain lucrative fields of legal practice still remain dominated by white practitioners. Such dominance prevents Black-owned firms opportunities also to enter the space because of the entrenched practice that are already well established. Commercial law is certainly one of those areas. Historically, it has been an exclusive preserve of white legal practitioners. Many practitioners from historical disadvantaged backgrounds have worked hard and have had to overcome many barriers in order to qualify as conveyancers. Yet, after qualifying to practice in this area of the law, they continue to face further barriers and are not given fair and equal opportunities to ply their trade successfully. Moderator, as such, I am pleased by major banks' renewed commitment in response to concerns raised by the Competition Commission on the relationship between banks and the conveyancers. The Competition Commission found this relationship to be governed through service level agreements and structured in exclusive and anti-competitive. Transformation in the legal fraternity means previously disadvantaged individual law firms must briefs from banks, mining companies, and the broader private sector. The cresting wave of profits synonymous with briefings from the private sector must reach Black-owned practitioners. Both the state and the private sector must craft a new deal which changes the legal landscape. There is no doubt that healthy competition between legal practitioners and law firms will translate into a better and more cost-effective services to the public, and as a result, expand access to justice. We must rid our industries of the barriers to entry that prevent previously individuals from accessing in particular markets. Transformative social compacts must anchor our approach to ensure that our economies and sectors are wholly inclusive. COVID-19 has exposed all the vulnerabilities of our systems, from the economic system right up to the justice system. Moreover, it has also emphasized how the economic injustices affect one's ability to access the criminal justice system or the justice system as a whole. Distinguished guests, now more than ever, we really need to ensure that the vulnerabilities of our system are addressed. Some speak of a post-COVID-19 society, but we cannot speak of such society as if it is in the distant future, and the actions that are required to transform our nation await that distant future. As we host this conference, learning to coexist and live with the virus, we have to do the same. We need to act now and collectively and act in unity. We all need to champion transformation There's no us and them. There's only South Africa. Ultimately, untransformed societies hampers all progress, and COVID-19 has shown we cannot afford to leave anyone behind, because those that are left behind will affect everyone in that society. On previous occasions in various platforms, I have said transformation in the legal profession can be effected. This requires us to take our historical injustices directly. This can be effected by a simple yet meaningful action, like the banking industry has done. We need to see more action from the private sector. I wish to informally invite the private sector to come to the transformation table. Let us collectively develop a legal charter or code, a legal charter that will not only bind our conscience, but one that hope to the young lady who is on the verge of quitting her practice because she does not see where next pay will come from. A charter that will make all provinces in the country viable areas of practice. Concretely, we need in-house lawyers to be willing to open up and take in candidate attorneys. We need in-house lawyers to be a lot more transparent about who they brief, how they elect these individuals, and ultimately what this means for the future of the profession. As we focus on reconstructing the office of the state attorney so that it can be more efficient and become an effective anchor of transformation, we also look to the private sector to play its part. Transformation also requires us to tackle corruption both in the private and public sector. As we are consistently discovering, with the state capture commissions for corruption to succeed, it takes good lawyers and professionals to do nothing. And some of them have also participated to facilitate it in some of these most sophisticated corruptions, as well in some of the high-profile matters on the Tongati, Hulat, and other high commercial matters. As a matter of fact, corruption is mostly aided by professionals with a sophisticated hand. It must be professionals who help the state, who help society to eradicate corruption. We have seen disturbing reports on corruption even during the pandemic. The president will announce a special investigation unit proclamation to address this issue soon. We call upon everyone in society involved in the containment of the virus to tackle this pandemic in an ethical manner. Ethical leadership in the management of societal affairs, including COVID-19, is an important glue between government and society. In Mandela's words, a legal profession which identifies itself with the needs and aspirations of all the people in South Africa is likely to prosper. My question to you today is, what is stopping us to ensure that the profession prosper so that the whole society can prosper? I thank you very much, moderator.
Greetings to all our delegates from all over the world and our esteemed panelists. I welcome you to our session brought to you by Nedbank in partnership with Popco Media. My name is Ntombi Mcoyi, the founder and managing director of InRise Consulting, which focuses on individual and organizational leadership development. Looking at the lineup of our speakers, I'm so excited for this discussion about the future of transformation and inclusive growth. Before we dive into the topic, this very important topic, I'd like to introduce the phenomenal women, our speakers that we have here in our virtual room. And as I introduce them to you today, I'd like them to just share very briefly short what they are grateful for today. Because I believe in these uncertain times when people are losing jobs and losing their family members, it's so important for us to just pause and take stock of the good that we have in life and the good in our workplaces and our businesses. So, to our speakers, I'd like to start with Gensani Nobanda, the Group Executive of Group Marketing and Corporate Affairs at Nedbank. Please greet us and say what you are grateful for today.
Dombi, I feel like you should have told us that you're going to say that to us. I'm not for a lot, to be honest, but I think a lot of it is just for my family and my health and my husband, who agreed to leave the office today so I could do this call from the office that he normally uses.
Lovely. Thank you, Genzani. Bongiwe Kunene, the CEO of the Banking Association of South Africa. Please greet the audience and let us know what you are grateful for.
Hi, good day, everybody. I have to say that I'm grateful for having passed through the 100-day mark. I am fairly new as the MD of BASA. I started on the April. So I started during lockdown. The lockdown is still ongoing. My office and the people I work with so far, touch wood, everybody is in good shape and we check in with each other all the time. I'm very grateful for the team that supports me. Thank you.
Oh, that's wonderful. And, all the best in your office. I'm sure already you're doing well.
Thank you.
Next, I'd like to introduce Farai Baiwa, the management lead at YES, which is Youth Employment Services. And Farai is also the co-founder of Africa Matters. Farai, please may you just say hi and say what you're grateful for.
Good morning, everyone, and I'm very excited to be here. I am definitely grateful to be on a panel with incredible Black women whom I look up to. I think the women on this panel have achieved so much, and we know how the plight is for Black women in South Africa, and it's just so inspiring to share a panel with them. And my hope is that such panels and seeing Black women in incredible spaces becomes normalized. So I'm grateful to be here today.
Wonderful. I share your sentiments, most definitely. I think you're also really awesome and amazing. And our audience is going to find out exactly how awesome you are in our discussion. Just to introduce as well, Zanele Morrison, the Director of Marketing and Corporate Affairs at the JSE.
Thank you so much. Thank you for welcoming me onto the panel. I think for me, really, I go back to the plight of so many South Africans at this time who don't have options, who don't have choices. And I'm grateful for the little that I do have, and try my best to extend anything that I have or know to those who don't. So I think it's a great opportunity to be on this panel to really talk about how do we enable this inclusive growth going forward. Is something that I think is really close to my heart. I believe what affects one person affects all of us, and we should never ever feel entitled or privileged enough to forget those who have less. So that's our job, and I'm really thrilled to be on this panel. Thank you once again.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much, Zanele. And true, we are very much more connected to each other than we know or realize or care to actually say. Now, getting into our discussion about the future of transformation and inclusive growth, I'd like to point out some of the realities that we see in South Africa today. One of the main realities is that we have a high unemployment rate. At this point in time, it increased to 30.1% within the first quarter of 2020. And what's more concerning is that with the rate of people losing their jobs, this statistic may actually increase by 2021. 65% 65.1% of top management positions are occupied by white South Africans, whereas Black African women occupy only 5.1% of top management positions. What is concerning about these inequalities is that more than 50% of our South African population is living below the poverty line. This means more than half of our population is earning less than 1,227 Rand per month, which of course is not enough to live on. Now more than ever, we need to change the narrative. We really need to stop talking about transformation that we've been talking about for 26 years in our democracy. Now is the time that we need to implement, we need to do something, we need to put more action in realizing the transformation and having inclusive growth. So I invite now our panelists to firstly unpack what is meant by transformation. So often this word is thrown around and used in so many contexts. We need to know what is transition. And I'd like to ask Bongiwe, if you can just say for us, what does transformation mean to you? And within the industry that you're in, how have you seen this playing out?
Thank you very much, Ndombi. For me, transformation is beyond Black African as compared to other races. Transformation that has true value has got to take into account the experiences of the people that you bring around you, and what informs or is a part of those experiences is where the individuals went to school. It's very much important when you have your workforce and talent that it is drawn from all the universities that we have in the country and even beyond, because the teaching, the methodology, the viewpoints that people come with from these different institutions is going to strengthen our organizations. So apart from that, there is also a point about multidisciplinary approaches to problem solving. If you've got the same type of thinking attacking a particular problem, you don't really have transformation, because what you tend to have is assimilation. So in a lot of contexts, I look at transformation through those lenses. You have different skill sets? Do you have different disciplines? Do you have obviously different color of people, but do you also have what informs their viewpoints? That to me encompasses the first point about transformation.
Thank you very much, Bongiwe. Thank you for that. I really appreciate, you going beyond the obvious in terms of race and gender, but also looking at what informs the person's perspective. And also, a lot of the times when we see people, whether at work or around the boardroom table, it's about creating that diversity in terms of skills and also opinions. So yes, I fully agree with you that we need to look beyond just the race and gender. Are there other inputs that the other speakers can have towards this in terms of their understanding of transformation? Danele, you have something to add to that? Oh, yes, I see that Kensani has got her hand up. Kensani,
thanks, Ndombi. So, I think we all know the problems, right, in South Africa. Unemployment and inequality are high, structural challenges, including slow GDP growth, and an education system that doesn't necessarily equip many South Africans for the workplace in general. But for me, it's not about the issues. And it's certainly not about the scorecards, although that's important. For me, transformation goes beyond, how we actually judge ourselves and measure ourselves when it comes to how we're transforming. So just a quick reflection. If you think about it, we wouldn't be sitting in different parts of the country just a few months ago. So what we've all demonstrated is that we can move and innovate and work collaboratively in an incredibly short space of time when we're forced to. And we need to harness this collective power. So for us as a bank, transformation is that we cannot be a sustainable business in an unsustainable country. And as we realize that our success is intrinsically linked to the macro success of the countries we operate in, then we have to drive transformation. So we embarked on a journey a few years ago, asking ourselves how we can make society more successful, because a successful society for me is a transformed society. So we've learned through trial and error that we need partnerships to succeed. We can't do it alone. So if you look at our partnerships with the Yes Initiative, that's exactly what we've done. We've realized that we need to innovate, we need tech, and digital transformation is incredibly important in this journey. And we've also realized that we need to reimagine how this could happen beyond traditional banking, beyond marketing to just sell our products, and beyond transformation that drives compliance to a scorecard. For us as a bank, and for me, when South Africa is sustainable, when South Africa is successful, then South Africa is transformed. And then, by the way, as a bank, we are also a successful, sustainable bank. So I think in our world, that's what transformation looks like.
Thank you, Gensane. That's absolutely lovely. And it speaks to what Professor Mohale was saying yesterday, that transformation, it's about creating something new. So moving away from the past. So the future needs to be different than what it is today, and it needs to be for the better. And so what you are talking about is really going back into the community, taking everyone with you. And that is the sentiment that we need to share as well, that there needs to be a lot of collaboration. We can't leave people behind. However, our reality today is that with so many inequalities that are glaring at us, how can we make this happen practically? And I'd like to pose this question to Farai. I know that you work a lot with Africa Matters, with youth, and also having your own background being from Zim and South Africa, there are a lot of inequalities that you've experienced there in terms of being included in different circles in society. What can you tell us in terms of moving forward with the inequalities that we have presently? How do we bridge that gap? What needs to happen?
Thank you so much for that question. I think it's a really, really important one. I think the first thing we need to do is to realize that the world before COVID-19 was full of inequality, was full of poverty, a lot of institutionalized racism, which a lot of speakers have pointed to, and also high levels of youth unemployment, which you highlighted as well. So from what we've seen in terms of how the world was working pre-COVID-19, we had a system that wasn't working. In fact, a system which is able to collapse within a few weeks of being locked down is clearly not a sustainable system. And as we now build back a better society, I think what is needed across all stakeholders is the realization that for me to create and shape the society I want, I need to play an active role. Very often there is a heavy reliance on government to be the one who will fix the inequalities within society on their own. But we need more collaboration for us to achieve and shape the sort of society we want. And that means collaboration from businesses. And we've seen this through Nedbank and ABSA partnering with the Yes Initiative to combat youth unemployment. That means collaboration between business and government. And that also means that us as citizens play a role. And one of the things that I'm constantly advocating for, particularly amongst young people, is what can we do to change our society? Very often we hear complaints that say South Africa has been a democracy for 26 years and there's still so many inequalities that plague us and hold us back. And yes, it's important that we acknowledge those, but what solutions are we driving forward? When you see that something
Yeah.
within your community is not working, how are you fixing it? How are you addressing it? Who are you partnering with to address it? And often we think that change and impact has to be on a large scale, but even small scale change by individual players is something that goes a long way. One of the experiences which we have learned through the Africa Matters journey, and for context, Africa Matters is a youth-led organization that I co-founded about 5 years ago, which to date with very limited money has impacted over 4,500 Africans across 10 different African countries through skills so that young Africans can transform the communities they come from. And one of the things we have learned from that experience of running a youth-led organization is that funding is so limited. Very often there is a lack of trust in young people, particularly young Black people, to run effective initiatives. But we've been asking corporates, and I had a privilege of speaking at the UN just last week, and one of the calls to world leaders was to say, believe in us as young people. We're not leaders of tomorrow, we are leaders of today. So if we want to build back a better world, if we want to change and transform society, you need to believe in us so that we can do it together. And I think that's what's critical for us to achieve transformation across every sector of our society.
Lovely. Thank you so much, Farai. And most definitely, we need to be more inclusive of youth in developing a transformed society. I love what you say, that it actually starts with us, with each and every single individual. Because yes, often we do look towards government to do a lot of things. We do look towards businesses, but what are we doing on a day-to-day basis within our homes, within our communities, within our workspaces? I always believe that leadership starts with self, and leadership should be developed very much at a younger age than, when people have titles. And for you as leaders today, women holding these positions of leadership, what kind of transformation did you go through to get to where you're at in terms of other younger people looking at you and knowing, okay, this is what I should do, or this is the mindset I should have. These are the hurdles I need to go through, and these are the sacrifices I need to make. I like to actually capture that in being in your positions, it doesn't happen overnight. It takes a hang of a lot to get there. So if you may share with us, what have been your learnings in developing as leaders? Zanele, I'd like to give you the question.
Thanks, Ndombi. So you've asked a question I'm not necessarily sure if I can answer for myself. And I think the only way that I can approach it is, I think, the need for us to understand the job at hand for personal transformation. I think we do not come from a household or a background, many of us, that has demonstrated all the core skills and steps required to build and to live in the society that is shaped by very different values more often than not. And it's got a very different construct and a very different legacy. So who we are and where we come from in our culture is not always fully aligned, nor do we have the circle of support oftentimes, and the circle of influence, the voices, and just the influence from a very young age towards the values we would need to espouse in order to really participate and play a very big role in corporate society, and which is important because it's the economic activity of the country. And for us as Black women, this is what we take back home to educate others. So we need to be in these roles in order to empower the next generation and to lift up the next generation. So I think there's a societal transformation that needs to take place that we are probably doing in our own part as leaders in our own roles, but there's a much bigger journey or a movement that needs to take place to take empowerment back and to provide it to as many people in our society as possible. COVID is a time where we're either going to get despondent about the future or we're going to get enthused. Now, how do you get enthused when we already come from such a society of disparity? We will really need something very special. We need leadership we need voices, we need technology, access to these conversations to be given to as many people as possible, so that people have a sense of hope. They can look around and find ways in which to empower themselves and to build themselves up. In our roles, we have to make sure that we are empowering every single individual in our teams, that we're leading with humanity, that we reach out beyond our teams, find people that we can influence, and do our part and do our best in what we do. If part of your portfolio is managing the CSI and the enterprise development, it's not just about handing money out. It's not just about giving them business that's going to help them for 1 month, 2 months, or 3 months. It's really about saying, how do we bring them closer to our ecosystem? How do we see where their gaps are? And how do we put into them invaluable contributions that can help them to better sustain themselves going forward? So we have a huge task on our hand. We can only take it one day at a time, one step at a time, and probably individual at a time as well.
Okay. Thank you very much, Zanele. That is very profound in terms of not only just giving out money, but actually taking businesses and small businesses in the community with you, holding their hand so that transformation can happen. We need to see more companies doing that, holding people's hands so that transformation can happen. It's not about handouts. And I think so often people think it's about just giving money or giving food. Let us show people how to be successful in business. Let us show people how to be able to put food on the table. So you also mentioned technology. And right now, with the fourth industrial revolution, technology plays a huge role in business. And not only business, but also our communities in terms of how we transform in terms of economic growth. The reality is there are a lot of people in small businesses, in township-owned businesses that don't have access to not only water, but electricity, infrastructure, safety. How then do we take technology into the community? What are the structures that need to be there? What needs to happen so that people do get technology into their hands? I'd like to ask this of Kensani. I know also that Nedbank has done a lot in terms of interacting with community. What needs to happen in terms of helping people to digitalize, their business and transform in the digital world?
Thanks, Dombi, for that question. So I think as a bank, we absolutely believe that technology can play a significant role in reimagining the future of transformation. But I don't want to opine on what that could look like. I actually want to talk about a practical example of how this can play out using a product that we've just launched. So if you look at our current GDP, currently small and micro enterprises contribute about 34% of the overall national GDP, and only 10% of these actually accept digital payments. This is despite the benefits of electronic payments. So it offers shoppers convenience and safety, the value it brings to your business in terms of higher spend, deeper insights, and digital financial tools. In essence, actually, electronic payments can increase your business revenue, not only from your existing business, but it gives you access to new markets in terms of clients who wouldn't have wanted to use cash, right? So one of the main reasons that small businesses cite for this lack of acceptance is that the cost of the point of sale device, which is the one that you tap your card on, they feel it can be expensive to purchase, to maintain, and it's time consuming to set up, learn, and navigate. So using this insight, we've launched an innovation called Tap on Phone, which allows you as a merchant to use your smartphone to accept payments without any additional hardware. So you use your normal data, you don't need to get a POS device. So why do I cite this example? I think firstly, we know that one of the pillars for the future economy is in this space. And innovation such a phone accelerates the growth of this sector. This is through the positive financial impact, as I've spoken about previously, but as well as the fact that it also saves the business money and time because they can receive electronic payments without having to invest in the costly hardware or invest in fixed data or telephone lines before they can start trading. And then we absolutely understand the value chain impact, right, of this financial growth. So if you look at the latest Household Affordability Index, which was just launched in 2020, in April 2020, it shows that when one individual gets some form of basic income, it has a positive impact on about 4 people with them or behind them. So I think I wanted to talk through this example because it shows just what an impact digital and technology can have in transforming our economy. To end off, I should just maybe want to have a quick reflection on something one of the panelists, I think it was William Parker from Old Mutual, said yesterday on a panel on education, and I'm going to paraphrase it a bit. He basically said we need our education system to deliver young people who understand human behaviors, for example, anthropologists, mixed with STEM, which we know as a country we don't perform well on, to deliver digital solutions that can make a real impact. For me, the launch of this product just proves just how true the statement rings true. It is a digital technology that, yes, absolutely gives business to Nedbank, but more than that, it really can change a small business's future growth potential. And as it does that, it changes the family that the small business belongs to. So for me, I absolutely believe that digital and technology is going to play a key role in transforming our economy. Thanks, Tony.
Very true. Very true in terms of, you help a small business, you're actually helping the whole family, you're helping the whole community. And that's how we can now actually promote inclusive growth by looking to those small businesses and saying, okay, as long as we invest in small businesses, we are also investing in our society, we're investing in South Africa. Now, looking at still the digital world, and often a lot of people who are not in the youth bracket are quite afraid of the whole digital revolution. And others are feeling, well, we are now losing our jobs because of this whole digital movement. How can we move together in all of this? Because yes, there are a lot of people losing jobs. There are a lot of people thinking, okay, they're losing jobs because of digitalization. How can we assure those who are now jobless at home that they are part of the movement, that they can also come along and move along with the digital industry? Bongiwe, if you can answer that for us.
Thank you. In that respect, every time when there is a major shift in the world, there are a lot of jobs being lost. In our case in South Africa, we've already seen massive numbers of jobs being lost. But if you are in a youth space, this is a time to get the information on what are these new jobs that are being created. We are fully aware that in the digital, there are a lot of new things. So right now, with COVID, we are seeing new apps coming up on tracking and tracing the movement of people. So it's clear that these are the jobs that didn't exist. So for example, the Department of Health, they have to do a massive employment drive to get people who are going to be able to manage this track and tracing, because there are some businesses, for example, in my space, in the space, which have got this information, which have got these tools, but there are very few. And this is a space that can be occupied very easily by the youth. And there are skills which are in the arena of coding, and those are sort of new skills. Some of them are fairly accessible for anyone who's got a cell phone. Just last week was the Africa Coding Week. More than 3 million young people participated. But I'm not sure how much the information flows to our young people, because these skills are definitely something that they can get into and be part of the digital economy.
Yes, yes. I fully agree in that already in the school curriculum, we need to start really teaching our youth, our young people, all these skills, because as was said throughout this conference, the skills that we are developing our youth to have, do they really correspond with what industry needs? And I think we really need to really look at that in terms of the educational system and in terms of skills, empowering people with skills that are relevant for the future. Now, if I think of small businesses, specifically speaking to Zanele, small businesses in South Africa often don't last or are sustainable beyond 5 years because of different aspects. Not that the idea is not good or the passion is not enough. Often people have great passion and good ideas. And however, when we go into the greater Africa, into other in Africa, we see that there's a lot of small businesses. Entrepreneurship is a live and living aspect of livelihood, but we don't see enough of that in South Africa. How can we promote more people to have sustainable businesses, such that if a small business said, I want to have my business registered on the JSE one day, how do I go about that? How can we support small businesses in growing further than just being small?
Thanks, Ntombi. It's a very interesting question. And over the last couple of weeks and months, I've really been questioning our understanding of this new economy that we need to shape. One of the challenges we have is that we believe entrepreneurship, and we translate it into a sophisticated way of approaching the problem. So we believe that somebody needs to have a business, employees, offices, and it needs to be a scaling huge business. We've missed a huge gap as to what you're talking to. If you look at the African market, they might be very entrepreneurial, but they're entrepreneurial at all levels. From the grassroots level, every single family selling something, doing something, creating something with their hands, crafting and selling it. So we're missing that big layer at the bottom that is really about just the fundamentals of an enterprising country. And there are ways in which we can infuse the ability for South Africans to do that. And I think government is not looking at giving people incentives to start a small business. For example, a token to come and collect goods to sell. Once you've sold them, you come back, you can repurchase again, or you can repurchase the next level because you've managed to build some credibility, and to create also little pockets that people can come in and access. I remember when in a particular country that I was traveling to, I was so surprised to see that the taxi drivers are incentivized to take people to particular stores that are directed to by government. So when the taxi driver takes people to go shop at a particular place, he then gets petrol money. So he gets a ticket, he takes to the garage to fill up his car. So government is already even saying tourists, anybody who's looking for this and this and that, if you get on public transport and you want something, the taxi driver is going to advise you where to, and then able to really spread the spread of money and of money between different communities. And one example. So I think we have to fill that gap because we're wanting people to jump into sophisticated businesses. And I quoted him yesterday as well. Ufus did the same thing a long time ago. He said somebody wants to own a chicken farm, but they've never sold eggs. Nothing wrong with selling eggs. Nothing wrong from selling from the back of your car, for as long as you have to, until there's a justifiable reason why you are giving somebody rental. So in my mind, we need to start building all opportunities to create community entrepreneurship that then will build itself into bigger SMEs that can then grow into large scale. If you look at one of the biggest companies today, Johan Rupert, I think, he talks about starting off selling cigarettes. So a lot of people with great businesses today can wind back right to the moment where they started, and you would be shocked at how small that initiative was. But they had the endurance, the perseverance, support, which a lot of people don't have. And that's when the support also makes sense. Even if support is given, it's given at a time where you are ready for it and you're not missing a whole lot of steps into being a sophisticated entity. So for now, I think that that's what I'll contribute.
Thank you. And yes, often small businesses think that they need finances in order to make their business sustainable. However, you speak a lot about the government-private partnership. And what are the policies that we have in place in South Africa that actually promote that? Because so often a lot of businesses are saying, well, our policies are not really promoting business or small businesses. And there are a lot of red tape in terms of, can you really start a business can you start a garage? So what are the actual framework we need to have? What are the policies that we have to have in place in order then to see such happening in terms of promoting small businesses? Any one of the panelists can take that? Bongiwe?
Of the regulations that govern how the business is conducted is starting from the need to register in a particular way, including how you then register your employees, how the format of your relationship with your employees needs to be governed. Some of it can be really heavy for small businesses. If there was a statutory audit on what small businesses have to go through, you would see that the example that was used earlier on someone who's selling eggs, it would be very heavy to a registered business and you have to interact with your employees in a particular way when all you are doing, your business model is eggs. So there is a need to sort of lighten up a little bit on the regulations and the creation of a graduation path as you become a bigger and bigger business, that then you graduate to taking on more and more regulation.
Okay, thank you. And again, to just zone in more in these partnerships, because I do think it's very, very important that we collaborate, that businesses collaborate, that government collaborates with private sector in forming some kind of transformation. What is the role of partnerships that needs to happen? I know Nedbank has mentioned quite a few partnerships that you're active in, and as well as yes. But these are only some organizations, some businesses. We really need to take this whole partnership role and promote inclusive economic growth in a much bigger way. So how can we promote these partnerships? What needs to happen actively today? What can happen in forging new partnerships amongst businesses and private sector and public sector? Kensani, if you can just elaborate more on that.
I'm actually glad Farai's on the call because I think she can speak more to our year's partnership, which we're incredibly proud of, right? In the context of a partnership between government, labor, and business, where we took on 3,200 young people to come work for us. I think everyone knows that it's very difficult for young people to get a job without some level of work experience. And I think that's the power of the YES initiative, is that these young people get some work experience and are able to hopefully get a future long-term job. But I maybe just wanted to pivot a bit, and I'm sure we've heard that word pivot in COVID-19. Because I actually just want to talk about the role that we can play as leaders in our own organizations to drive our partnerships that can really make a positive impact. So I head up marketing at Nedbank, And in the context of heading up marketing, I manage a marketing budget of more than R1 billion. So to get our marketing messages across, we work with a number of advertising agencies, and the largest of these advertising agencies is an agency called Joe Public. Joe Public is a pretty impressive agency. They won Agency of the Year at the Louis 2 years in a row, which is a South African advertising award. As our agency partners, they've been level 1 for a couple of years, which is fantastic because those are the type of people that we want to work with. But in my personal capacity, I just felt like I wanted to work with agencies that go beyond transformation from a scorecard perspective, as in I'm level 1, and that's great, but who can actually, impact, I think, our country in various ways. And one of them is I want to work with agencies whose ownership also reflects our country. So we kicked off a conversation with Joe Public about 18 months ago to say, we'd like you to look at your ownership structure to bring in more Black people. And I'm so incredibly proud of the deal that they announced about 3-4 months ago, I think it was. And I'm proud for them, obviously, but for us, as I think a corporate that said, this is who we want to work with, because currently their ownership has gone to their staff, has gone to 3 Black employees who've been in that business for about 15 years, and are incredible Black employees. I mean, Kolisa is one of the best creative creative executives in South Africa. And the founding partners of Joe Public, Pepe and Gareth, now own less than 50% of Joe Public. And the journey we've been on with Joe Public to get them to understand that this is not about them giving away a business they've spent really hard, a lot of time to build, but it's really around catapulting and really changing what ownership of organizations look like. So for me, I think that's the role that, us on this panel, in the organizations that we sit in, we can drive that change because we need to be exceedingly clear that these are the type of partners that we want to work with. They need to believe in the South Africa that we want to see. So I absolutely believe the partnerships are important to achieve what we want to achieve. Thanks, Ndobile.
Wonderful. That's super great. And I like that already in your position that you're looking at succession planning, because it's not just about, once you leave your office, then you find someone, to replace you, but it's about grooming people already, getting them prepared and being part of their process of taking up leadership and taking up space. So Farai, I know you being part of the YES services as well as Africa Matters, working with youth. And often we hear a lot, youth may graduate and sit at home with their qualifications, finding it hard to get employed. How have you worked past those challenges? What have been the successes that you and other organizations can keep on doing for the future?
Thanks so much, Dobby, for that question. I think, what's so important to realize is that when we speak of youth unemployment, the focus is often on your graduates. And if youth unemployment had to be an upside down triangle, your unemployed graduates would take up probably this much of the youth unemployment rates in South Africa. The rest of those who are unemployed are those who perhaps dropped out of university, those who dropped out of TVET colleges, or even those who dropped out of matric before even being able to attain their matric. And because they don't have what are considered qualifications to get into the formal economy, end up not being productive in society or end up in the informal economy. That being said, I think that the informal economy is so valuable to how our country operates. In fact, it's so valuable to how Africa operates. So that's not such a bad thing. But when we talk about how can we combat youth unemployment and how do we combat it inclusively, I think both YES and Africa Matters have done a really great job at that. To start firstly with the YES side, it really links to the partnerships discussion we've just had, whereby it's your partnerships between your private sector, labor, and yes, looking at how do we combat youth unemployment. And in the partnerships that we've had with Nedbank, for example, where Ms. Kansani mentioned that, we had 3,200 youth empowered across 10 different sectors, including healthcare. And I am really, really privileged because I've had the opportunity to work on the ground at youth before my experience with YES now. And in working with youth at the clinics like I did, you see a youth from the first time they walk into training to 2 months after. And this work experience has just catapulted them to a next level of confidence, to a next level of self-belief, to a next level of saying, I'm young in my society, I'm working, so I have to ensure that I contribute. And I think the beauty with the YES program is not only that your corporates can get their BEE level ups. I think that is one of the benefits, but it's not the main one. The beauty of it is that you empower young people, and sustainably so, because YES also requires percentages for absorption. And when we say absorption, that's either youth get permanent opportunities after their 1-year work experience, or youth can form their own businesses, which is supported by the corporate that sponsored them. And we've seen a number of youth go on to form businesses. And in fact, one of the most recent stories we featured is of a youth who is based in one of the villages in the Eastern Cape. And as a result of COVID-19, he started making masks for people in his village. He now employs 7 people. He's with a host called Youth at Work and sponsored by Oracle. And that's incredible because he's employing 7 people. He's a young person within his community. He's combating COVID. And I think that it's just so beautiful to see the potential of young people to actually make change. If we're looking at the other perspectives and ways in which we can combat youth unemployment, one of the incredible experiences I've had is seeing the potential of young people for change. Very often we don't have faith in unemployed young people, particularly those that don't have your university degrees or your diplomas, because there's stigma attached to that. But last year we had an incredible opportunity where 300 young people got to go to Microsoft for free on an event hosted with Microsoft. And for the full day, they could learn about tech and innovation and drones. And then they had to ideas. And the incredible ideas that came out. There were some ideas to get your HIV positive patients to be on ARVs. There were some other ideas to monitor kids in school. And if you just see that potential, it then becomes, how do we harness it? And that means we have to be intentional about creating training opportunities for youth, creating education opportunities for youth. And particularly within the African context, we have over 230 million young people between 15 to 24. Now, pre-COVID, we already had high levels of youth unemployment. Post-COVID, with economic declines, youth unemployment rates have skyrocketed. And how do we combat that? We have to have a partnership between your businesses and between your government, between your civil society and your youth. And we have to be intentional, particularly for businesses and civil society, in what we are doing to our youth, creating opportunities or empowering businesses that they run.
Wonderful. What I really appreciate in the work that you are doing is that it attains to youth holistically. We have noticed how being unemployed, people may lose their dignity, their confidence, drive for life. But whether they are graduates or have dropped out of matric or high school or university, everyone deserves dignity of life. And what the work that you're doing is that looking at people holistically, looking at their psychosocial impact, working on their minds as well as their skills. Because it's not just about helping people with skills, it's also about developing people's emotional intelligence as well. I'd like to open it further into the whole of Africa. I think there are huge missed opportunities in terms of us looking at our continent and the value that lies within our continent. How can we promote people to trade within Africa? Often we are looking at big companies, international companies, but there's so much here. How can we promote our own African people to trade with other African countries? I don't see enough of that happening. Zanele, if you can answer that for us, because I know you have had a lot of continental travel in terms of businesses.
And once again, this is a decision that we need to take as a country. I think we are a little bit like Cape Town, thinking it's not part of South Africa. We are Africans thinking we're not part of the African continent. How is government leading in this? I really think this is one area in space where they can really chart the way and show their partnership, especially now with the work that's coming up around infrastructure. Some of the greatest work we've actually done, the work that we did with Mozambique, from an infrastructure point of view, there's nothing to parallel it in South Africa in terms of just how well we've done to partner and to build something great. And I think we need to do more of that as a country in the infrastructure space. And when we do that and we talk about it and we create more bridges between ourselves and the other countries on the continent, will also encourage people to be open to the thinking and the ideas that Africans bring into South Africa. But it's going to be very difficult for SMEs to be able to do that if at home they don't feel the sense of security for their businesses.
It looks as if we've lost Zanele there. Zanele, can we hear you? Are you still there? Or maybe one of the other panelists, if you can elaborate on what Zanele is saying in terms of stretching now business beyond South Africa to other African countries. How can we have a better relationship? What does government need to do to promote those kind of relationships in terms of trading with other African countries?
So I think that government has done a lot in this respect. They recently signed on the Africa Free Trade Agreement, which allows us as South Africa to have stronger trading relationships with the continent. What is missing in these discussions is most of the agreements at continental level happen between presidents, the ministers in cabinet, and some very high profile people if communities are involved. Whereas my experience in the business sector is that business actually happens because of a connection between people. So the link is business to business. And if we do not have enough curiosity as South Africans about our continent, then we miss a lot of intersections at a human level, because it starts with the individual, then business. I've been surprised, pleasantly surprised, I must say, every time I'm in any other African country apart from my own South Africa, the level and just the of an involvement by young people in issues that I would be trying to explore. They come across as very confident, and you can see that African youth is very empowered. These are people who already know that the future is theirs. So whether you're speaking academically or in terms of they are very empowered. So it is up to us as South Africans to have this curiosity, to find out in the value chain of what you are managing as a business, how you can get business managed by Africans in the African continent as a whole involved in what you are doing. Because I can attest to the high quality products and also to just experiencing this involvement with youth, which leave me enthused for days after meeting them.
Yes. Thank you, Bongiwe, for that. I see Kentani would like to add as well. Please do.
So I'm incredibly inspired by both what Zanele and Bongiwe have said. And I can't necessarily add anything from a technical perspective, but I just think one of our challenges, and unfortunately we're seeing it even in more younger people, is we tend to have a much more fear mindset than a growth mindset. And actually, Africa represents growth for us as people individually. So when I travel, and I love traveling, for me, that's my own personal growth. For you as a business, it's access to bigger markets. And I understand why that is. We've got a very difficult history. Our economy is not growing. People feel there's no opportunities. But I wish we could have, I don't know if you know the Men in Black light bulb when they're trying to make you forget something and they just put it in front of you. I wish we could do a collective growth mindset for us as a whole, as a country, because I suspect that we would start to look at things pretty differently. And instead of being fearful of other African countries, we would understand that this can represent some really good growth for our country and for us personally and for our businesses.
Lovely. Yes, Kentani. The other thing is that adding to what you're saying, most definitely we need a growth mindset. And I think the obstacles that prevent a lot of people from doing that is actually us not knowing each other. And being fed in terms of media and all the sorts and television life of the West instead of focusing on what we hear as African people. So I really want to promote us as African people finding out more about each other, getting some kind of understanding. And this is not just in terms of, us finding out about other African countries, but within South Africa, they're not discovering, new cultures and new ways of doing things. And I think that needs to change. And fortunately, with the youth, it is changing. However, with technology as well, we see both positives, but there can also be negatives in terms of technology, that technology can be used to abuse people and hinder progression. What are the examples that you have seen that we need to guard our youth from and guard our businesses from in terms of technology hindering growth and progression? Farai, if you can look into that, because in the space of youth, I'm sure there's a lot that has happened with regard to technology, but what are the things that we need to guard youth from in terms of abuse or safety or, in business that can affect business negatively?
Yeah, so I'd say from the technological perspective, and very often when you talk about the fourth industrial revolution and the coming of technology, including youth, get scared. And I think the first realization we have to have is that technological justice must always be people and planet centered, and that technology, if used correctly, and the fourth industrial revolution, if directed correctly, can actually be an enabler to the most disadvantaged person in society. And in terms of particularly as young people, need to guard against in terms of our use of technology we've seen with tech the ability to share a message from South Africa all the way to France, all the way to the US, and the easy transmission of information. But the same way in which information can be transmitted easily, the wrong sort of information can be transmitted easily. So as young people, we need to definitely equip ourselves with digital skills. And I think lots of that does happen, even from a YES perspective. We've got YES apps that all of the youth get and have to complete modules to learn. But the second thing we have to do as young people is to look at, as we get information, as we engage in information, as we gain skills, what sort of messages are we learning? And what sort of messages are we receiving? And is this the right message? We've often heard the term fake news, and I mean, we've seen it affect different industries, different governments even. And we then have to be able to discern information as young people to be able to determine when it's right and when it's not right. We also have seen this in light of COVID as well, with different news stories popping up. On the more positive side of tech, I think that technology definitely presents an opportunity for young people, and just I think the world in general, to truly transform the communities that they come from. If you're looking at technology from a healthcare perspective, for example, I mean, you now have actual tech whereby you've got your normal pill box, which is labeled Monday to Sunday, and for your HIV positive patients, or even patients with other who need chronic medication, your pill box will alert you when it's time to take your medication. If you ignore that alert, it will alert you on your phone. If you ignore that alert, it will alert you on your name. And that's how technology is being leveraged for greatness. If you're looking again from the healthcare side, there's a new invention called the Pele box, which can be found outside Tembisa main clinic, whereby different patients can go and receive their medication without having to stand in queues for hours and hours waiting for that same service. And again, this is a technological intervention or invention created by a young person. If we're looking at another great use of technology, like I mentioned, the Yes apps, where you've got your Yes phones, and young people have to learn on the Yes program 35 modules that are preparing them with work, that are ensuring that they're not only employable, but also empowered. And I think that's thinking we need. And then lastly, and how it's been used well by young people, from the Africa Matters perspective, we've launched webinars, which means that young African experts can talk on a variety of issues from anywhere in the world and inspire masses of other young Africans from wherever they come from. So I think technology can indeed be a great thing, and we have seen the greatness of technology in other African countries like Rwanda, like Ghana, like Nigeria and Kenya. And I think if we leverage it here in our own home country as well, and apply levels of interconnectedness and learning from each other, African youth can continue to grow and can indeed shape an inclusive society.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Farai. And you've clearly explained, how technology can be very positive. I love that, people are no longer having to stand in lines, for instance, and they can get their medication. If we can have more of that, people will start to see how technology becomes a solution instead of something that they need to fear. So I'm really, really hoping that we'll see more developments like that and more education, really, of helping people to get to that level. Now, also looking at another aspect, we are now talking about the future of transformation and economic growth, and the future of really including everyone in this growth. Presently, under COVID, we're having working women who are moms, wives, working remotely from home. We have people with diverse responsibilities, and we're also living in a patriarchal society. And so far, we've been talking about advancing and changing of mindset. How in South Africa presently can we promote young people to be resilient in the circumstances of domestic violence within their households, of being oppressed or shut down when they want to speak up? How can we really balance out the gender inequalities in helping us all to transform and move forward together? Kensani, if you can kind of get into that in terms of being a leader yourself and a working woman, how can we promote other working women to break away from the gender inequalities and to thrive in today's world, being a woman with ambition and leadership?
Thanks, Dombi. I think you'll realize that I like to make examples based on my job or my personal life and all of that. So I think maybe again, just to use a personal example around some of the issues that I think we as women sometimes have. So I think it was about 2008. I was a category director at Unilever at that time, and I was looking after the tea category. And I had an opportunity to go on an aviation to Dubai. At the same time, I had a counterpart, a guy, who also had an expatriation opportunity. And when I got my offer, I took the offer and I signed it, and I was very excited. I'm going to live in Dubai and have a fantastic sort of life. And he took quite a long time to actually sign his offer. And I didn't understand it at that time. So once we were both, in our different markets, I actually asked him, so why did you take so long to sign your offer? And he explained to me, so the way Unilever worked was that if you're going to go on expatriation, they did an analysis of what your cost of living in your home country would be, and then in your new country, and then they gave you sort of a salary, the new cost of living. And how they calculated it was based on a particular basket of goods. So he asked firstly, what is in the basket of goods? So obviously they say bread, milk, and all of that. He said, well, no, my life's actually very different. That can't be how you judge what my cost of living is. You're going to have to use other goods. And those goods, I mean, some of them were probably like she was regal and all of those good stuff. But they basically actually changed the overall cost of living. So I said to him, so why did you sometimes said women, you tend to accept exactly what's put in front of you without challenging and asking for more. So I reflected a bit on that and thought, is he really telling the truth? I then had the opportunity to meet up with Twelo Kodisang, who was the HR vice president at the time of Unilever. And I did with him and I asked, I think as women, we tend to be much more accepting of what's put in front of us, not negotiating, versus men. And he said, absolutely. And he literally made an example of both me and my male counterpart, just how we signed our offers. And I don't necessarily think, Dombi, that it's specifically, I've seen it as I am doing offers, trying to hire women as men, and tend to be much more confident in what they ask for. Even for performance reviews, men come in and give themselves exceed even when they're performing. Women tend to be a lot more sort of deliberate, and even if they're exceeding, they probably say they're performing. And for me, I think, and I'm so glad to see all these powerful women in this call, because our role is absolutely, as we do mentorships, as we guide the young women who are coming up, is to teach them the lessons around be very clear of your value and make sure that you communicate it. Now, I'm not saying that they are, the systems are obviously there. We know men earn more than us. But I really hope that, to Serena and Venus Williams and the fight that they had from a tennis perspective to be paid the same as men, we have to do that fight. And they were supported by men, which is fantastic. But we can't expect anyone to actually go on that fight for us. We have to do it ourselves. So yeah, I just think, so right now, in fact, in any negotiation, I've become a lot more confident and a lot more direct in terms of what I want. But that is not something that I had inherently in me. That is something I was lucky enough to learn about, grow, and something that I continue to try and impart to any to women that I mentor.
Okay, lovely. I really enjoy that in terms of there was a change process that happened and a realization, an introspection that you went through to then decide that this is what you want to do, this is the person you want to become. And you're quite right in that most of us as women, we tend to shy away and not be confident or not speak too loudly or not be direct about what we want. And that is something that we need to learn a lot as women to promote more. The other side of that is that with women empowerment that has happened so much over the years and has been spoken of very well and strongly, it is also important that we take along the men and the young men, that we teach also to handle the empowerment of women. Because then what we have is where men feel disempowered, as if their power has been taken by women, and we then have violence and things like that. However, practically in your workplaces, you've come across obstacles and situations where you have had to stand up as a woman. So if you can just take us through that, what were the structures that you had to fight? What did you have to do to really take your stand and not be oppressed, or not be, be affected by fear, or to go beyond the fear because of the greater purpose? Do you have any examples like that in your workspaces, Farai?
I could feel that question was coming to me. So I have been called a troublemaker in various workplaces, and I think it's a good thing, because to me, a troublemaker, at least in how I define it, is someone who sees something that is perhaps unjust or just not right, and is not afraid to call it out, because if it does not align with what is just and right, and it does not align with your values, then it should not be happening in the first place. And the first thing I'd say is that I have seen resilience. And because I've seen resilience, I am then able to be as resilient as I can. I've seen resilience in my mother, who is an exec at a big IT company here in SA, and I've just seen how she's conducted herself through different challenges. I've seen resilience in my grandmother, who has always had a passion for lecturing and teaching, but in the time wasn't allowed to actually lecture, and had to give night classes to white lecturers, simply because she wasn't of value enough to be able to lecture. I've also seen resilience in the 9 Black women I interviewed for my master's research, which looked at the experiences of Black women in private financial companies in South Africa. And I also see resilience in all of the women on this panel today. I think a Black woman in such a high position was definitely something that didn't happen overnight. Took different challenges, but you are today, and I really hope that each of you are so proud of yourselves. When I think of different challenges I've experienced, I think what has helped me a lot is that I went to Stellenbosch University. So that already taught me, how do you stand up against something that is not right. And the university definitely shaped me for the rest of my life and my career. One of the biggest challenges I faced was towards the end of last year and the beginning of this year, whereby I just had to speak up against things that were just not right. And I'm always someone that has always led with passion, that has always led with ethics, and that doesn't always work within different spaces. Not everyone would like to see it that way, and I've always tried to be really understanding. Things are just not right, and especially when it affects the treatment of particularly of young Black people, then I will definitely speak up. So I have spoken up, I have resisted, and as much as at times it can be a lonely journey, it's always the right time to do the right thing. And I must say that no matter how difficult it has been speaking up against different situations, I have always felt vindicated afterwards when the outcomes have best benefited the people I'm representing, be it employees, be it youth, be it colleagues. And I think as a result of that vindication, it's actually what got me into YES. So to quickly share, I met my new boss, who is Tajmir, the CEO of YES, an incredible woman of color powerhouse once again. And I met her when I was presenting a former youth program that I was leading on the ground. And she said to me, I really love your passion. I can see that you're a very ethical leader. Come and work for YES. And I was like, okay, this is then an opportunity to have impact on an even larger scale. YES has impacted over 1,000 youth to date, so why not? And as a result of, I think, speaking up for what is right and standing for it, I'm now here working at YES and working under a woman who sees so much potential in me, and someone that I aspire, and someone that inspires me every single day. So definitely as Black women, there are different challenges and experiences we face in the workplace. But my encouragement, especially to the Black women on this panel, is that every move you make and how you got to where you are has inspired so many young people in the workplace like myself. And we really and truly, I think, I stand on the shoulders of giants like yourselves. And I'm excited to see just how South Africa will continue to transform with the foundation that you have laid and continue to lay for the youth of this country.
Oh, wonderful. Truly amazing. You also remind me of what Professor Mahad always says, that it is our responsibility to lift as we rise. And you speak a lot about ethical leadership. And our reality is that we see a lot of organizations, companies having their values on the wall, and they communicate this during the induction of new staff. However, that's where it ends. Ethics doesn't become part of the culture of the organization, doesn't become part of how they do things and how they interact with their customers. So somehow the ethical culture is lost there. And where ethics really matter is not when everything is fine and going well. Ethics really matters when our values are challenged, when we have crises, where we have change, such like during this COVID period. So it's very interesting to see in terms of how companies, whether small or big, respond during this time. What kind of leadership do we see during this time? And so I'd like you as our speakers just to elaborate more on how can we drive ethical leadership, because from what we have seen, media tells us differently. There are a lot of companies that people looked up to, and meanwhile there were ethical failures that they went through. So as businesses, whether small or big, how can we drive the ethical leadership and drive ethical culture? Zanele, I'd like you to answer that.
Yeah. I think that we have such a great opportunity in the new economy. Once we start to broaden the spread of businesses, so now it's not concentrated in a number of listed entities. I mean, if you look at the entities listed on the exchange, you probably have like a top 40 that is defined on the exchange. But also, mind you, you have many others that are not on the exchange, that are operating on the periphery. And we've got great institutions. We've got the Institute of Directors that is part and parcel of creating the King Codes, and have done a massive job in making it simple, making it easy to understand, easy to implement, really aligned to business versus a regulatory framework that uses the language and the thinking that CEOs of businesses cannot actually understand and easily implement. So we've done that. We've got these great policies. I think the education journey is also going to be one that's also going to change shape, and it's changing shape worldwide. It's not just now in South Africa, where we're really creating easy access to know-how. The organizations in South Africa has signed a treaty as part of the global treaty around easy to understand language, something that's not very well known. I learned about it on LinkedIn on one of those programs that I was so surprised is offered for free. And they're talking about easy to understand English. So when a company signs to open up a bank account or to register their entity, or they're trying to pay taxes, it is incumbent upon institutions to make the language easy to understand. And people will comply when information is easy to access, easy to understand, and it also is relevant and makes sense for their businesses. So I think everybody's on that journey and on that map, and I hope that the institutions that are supporting industries and entrepreneurs do see the calling, as they do at the IOD, to really reach more, teach more, and enable more. So I've got lots of hope. I've got lots of excitement and really, I hope I'm around, and I do want to be around to see what the new economy looks like, to see how people are empowered. I want to see how we change as businesses, as we readjust our strategies, to be part of the economic revolution that this pandemic will actually bring. I think whilst we need to have that, we need to also balance it with the challenge that we have. The social gap of the have and the have-nots is really risk for corporates and for businesses. When we did our scenario analysis as an organization, social uprising is probably one of the things that concerns us the most, because people may not know how to get themselves out of the situation into a better state. Our government might not be able to enable it fast enough, meaningfully enough, for us to actually avoid that risk. And then there will also be repercussions. Hope lies in the fact that we have had these before. We've been through it in a country. Those of us around this platform, except for perhaps one person, won't remember the uprisings that we had. They won't remember apartheid. They won't remember us being closed off from the rest of the world, and not being allowed to participate in the global markets. But those of us who do, we need to remember that we can make it. We need to remember and also make sure that we have the hope, and we share the hope that we can go through this particular challenge as well, and land on the other side once again, a light for the continent, and really a place that provides, like what Nelson Mandela did for us. We need to do this for ourselves one more time and show the world that this is a meaningful place to be with great opportunities for growth.
Lovely. Wonderful. Interesting you should mention the IOD, the Institute of Directors, because I used to work there. And yes, the programs that are provided there are very informative. However, such education and programs is not always visible to the small businesses or to the business in townships and rural areas. And so I think it is really, really important that what you are doing as different partnerships, taking people along with you. It may not even be money that they're needing, but it may be mentorship, it may be coaching, it may be, developing your supply chain or developing a small business to actually qualify to be a supplier of your business or other businesses. Because I find so often a lot of people say, but we look out for tenders, it is so corrupt, they can't get in, or once they do get the tender, then they have to do payoffs of so many people, or they don't get their monies in on time, and it kills small businesses. So those are some of the challenges, just looking on the surface, that are happening and that speak directly to ethical leadership. It is so possible to lead a successful business ethically. It is possible to be a leader, uphold ethical values. And I think this platform here, yourselves as panelists, are a very good example of it is possible to have ethical leadership. It's really now about promoting others to take the same journey, to go through the hardship, and that actually builds people for a better tomorrow. As we're nearing closer to the end of this wonderful discussion, I'd like to just ask each one of our speakers, each one of you, to say in short, now looking forward towards the future of transformation and inclusive growth. And I say the future as in today. We are the future. Today is the future. What are you going to continue doing or start doing? What are we going to stop doing in order for us to realize this transformation and inclusive growth? Farai, would you like to start in the closing?
Thank you so much, Ntombi. And I think thank you so much to all of the panelists for what has been a really great and informative. Something that I will continue to do is to build back a better society. And that means contributing through my work capacity, but also in my personal capacity, to how we combat inequalities, how we combat poverty, how we combat matters of institutionalized racism, and also high levels of youth unemployment. From a work capacity to be even more intentional, continue to ensure that we've got strengthened partnerships, because we do need partnerships for us to create the society we want. And that means encouraging Nedbank to renew their partnership with YES. And that means encouraging all the other speakers in your different capacities on this panel to keep working with YES and to work with YES so that we can create thousands and thousands of jobs for unemployed youth in our country. Thank you so much, Ntombi, for a great panel.
Thank you. Thank you, Bahrain. Zanele, if you may just of what you are going to continue doing or start doing, and what will you stop doing in contributing to a transformation and an inclusive growth in the future?
So this panel has been very insightful for me, and I want to say thank you to the other participants. I was so excited because it meant that I could actually meet them and further extend the relationships I have. I'm going to definitely continue being a passionate leader, a teaching leader, and an uplifting leader. Those are my core leadership values, and I love the fact that I walk away and I want people to know that they've learned and they've grown. And if we all did that, I think so many more women would get to their highest potential. One of the things that I'm going to stop doing is what I learned today. I think it's Kansani who mentioned it, is not knowing my worth. I think it's something that is so intrinsic within us that we're sometimes not aware that we are doing it. And it's a lifelong thing. It's a little bit like what Oprah said, that to say no and not feel that is a lifelong struggle. The ability to understand your self-worth and to make sure that you are always nearing and living at your point of worth is a lifelong struggle. So that's what I'm taking away. Thank you so much for the panel and for moderating us. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Kensani, if you can be there, just close up for us.
Thanks, Ntombi. I think firstly, I never forget how lucky I am that I have the job that I have, because it is absolutely aligned to my personal purpose. So if you look at the bank's purpose, which is to use our financial expertise to do good, in the impact that that can have on our country, it is so incredibly aligned to the impact that I want to have. So I will continue to be a champion of that, whether it's through the work that we do from a marketing perspective, from a CSI perspective, and the products and services that we launch. Our purpose as a bank guides our strategy, it guides our behaviors, it guides our actions. We know that we have a responsibility and we have an opportunity to contribute towards a thriving economy, a well-functioning society. And we really want to be able to do that beyond just CSI. We want to be able to do that in the context of adding business value, because when a business can harness its purpose, I really believe that lives can change. So I will definitely continue to harness that. And then I think I'd love for Rai threw in the yes thing. I suspected she would. But we obviously as a bank want to continue to support initiatives like that, because they're important in terms of how our country grows. And then finally, Toby, just to say to you, thank you for managing.
Oh, wow. Kensani, we still have you? Maybe if we can move to Bongiwe, if you can just share a last word for us while Kensani gets back.
Okay. Let me just close by saying thank you very much for inviting me to be part of this powerful panel. It is the first time that I meet everybody who is on the panel. So just by this exposure, I'm meeting new people and I feel very empowered. What I will continue to do is to attract diverse talent around me. make sure that we also have a fair regional spread. Because if we are all, everyone who is employed in BASA is voting, we are getting a fair sense of what is going on around the country. And professionals that I work with, I've already committed that I will empower them through exposure to opportunities that arise as we go along. And given this, we have a wonderful constitution. I think I just have a dedication to carry on the values that are in the South African Constitution.
Lovely. Thank you, Bongiwe. Just checking if Kentani is back yet. I know she just wanted to end off. All right. I'd like to say thank you so much to you phenomenal women. Really, I'm so to be on this panel and to engage with you further beyond this panel, and so impressed at the work that that you're doing and the impact that you're having, not only on businesses, but society as a whole. I'm sure our delegates have drawn so much through your thought leadership and your inspiration. I do encourage our delegates to ask questions. We'll have a Q&A session after this. So do jot down your questions. We'll be going to the next session. And thank you for being with us throughout this whole conference. I do encourage everyone that the change that we want to see starts with us. We are the transformation. So from today, ask yourself, what are you doing differently? What are you doing to contribute to a positive future, to contribute to a positive economic growth? Thank you so much. Thank you to Nedbank and also Topco Media.